Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Attract and Standout podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Hawley, and I am thrilled for today's guest. I have with me Leigh Burgess. She is a thought leader, game changer, and powerhouse connector determined to ignite and support the bold journey of others. And there's nothing better than being bold, as all of you know, and using your voice in big, powerful ways. Leigh, I'm excited to meet you and connect with you more. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I am the CEO of Bold Industries Group, a company I've co-founded with my daughter in 2020, the middle of 2020. The majority of my career, I was in the corporate world, and I just got to a point in that point in time of my career that I was burnout. I had really run pretty hard in my roles and done incredible work. I still was good at what I was doing, but needed to choose my health. And it was a surprise to me in the sense of I didn't have a plan. I didn't plan it for months in advance. I just got to a point where I really honestly needed to take a big swing of bold for myself and believe in what was next. And it was a very freeing moment, but also filled with, fear of what if and what if it doesn't work. But I was fueled with a whole bunch of self belief and off I went. And so for the last 5 years, I've been building my business, and it has just been an incredible ride in the sense of what we've learned and the things that we've done, all the way from starting off doing consulting to moving into coaching and then doing events, a membership, and had a book come out last year. So continuing on in year 5 and excited about what's ahead.
That's amazing. And I love that you're doing this with your daughter. What brought the two of you together when it came to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I think it just was a funky time of the world. The beginning in the middle of 2020 with the pandemic was just challenging on a lot of levels. And I think that kind of, if it was good, I think things got better, or you knew like things like relationships or connections or those types of things were really great. And if it wasn't good, it really kind of exacerbated kind of it wasn't good. And that's kind of like the burnout piece for me. For her,
Yeah.
she was just finishing her graduate program internship at MIT, and the world shut down. And so it was just an opportunity for us to do things together. And I said, here's what I'm doing. Would you like to help? And she is a true co-founder, investor, and all of that into the company. So it's just been a great experience. She's 25 years younger than me, so it's also a vantage point on what I would see as challenges at 53. She sees them obviously different, 25 years younger, and also gives me a voice to younger women who are, working through their career and some of the challenges that we see later in our career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the dynamic of, the different generations. I have four kids, three of them are boys, and then my daughter's
Okay.
13. And I love her perspective. Well, all the kids' perspectives, but like connecting it with your daughter, like there's
Hmm.
something special about that
Yeah.
daughter, mother-daughter relationship and the conversations that can come out of it, what you pull and how, we might look at one thing one way and then like I get a perspective from my daughter and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. Like it's a good way to like shift our thinking and really help us kind of see like the full 360 view of
Hmm.
what's going on in the world,
Yeah.
especially because there's just so many things that we look at differently just from the generations and how we're taught and the way that we consume and how we see things in those ways.
Yeah, I think there's pressures in all directions, and I think sometimes the pressures for uh, young women are different than certainly the pressures for someone who's in their 50s. And I think also just things that they've had to deal with in their life that I did not. So, like, for example, we didn't have social media, we didn't have, all the phone stuff. Like, that just wasn't something that I had in high school and not very much even in college. So, I'm thankful for that, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have survived it, but I think, from the perspective that it's also just seeing kind of the things that they are interested in, and how that also connects with some of the things we're doing. Like thought leadership is a great example. We're both doing that, but it looks different at different generational kind of pieces to that. As you move forward, kind of what you're going to talk about and how you're going to talk about it. So it's been a wonderful experience, and I think just being able to be around her and have conversations and get that vantage point of our business is really a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And leaving your corporate career to start the business, like what things from your corporate do you think you brought into your entrepreneur journey?
Hmm.
that like have really supported you and helped you get the success that you've had so quickly.
Yeah, I think I brought a lot of the good stuff. So I think, for me, I was very concentrated in strategy and operations and administration in my role. And I think I brought a lot of those pieces in. I think along with I'll figure it out, that growth mindset that I think it's always been with me, even if I don't know how, I'll figure it out. And I think the key thing as an entrepreneur is when you're starting off, realizing that you don't have to be everything to everyone and you don't have to do some of the things that people tell you right away. Like you really need to focus in on, depending on what your goals are. Mine was revenue creation and creating my marketing funnel. I think that was very, very important. It didn't matter that I didn't have 10,000 followers or X number of podcasts or didn't have an article in Forbes. Like those aren't the things when you come out of the gate. That you need. I think you develop those over time, but I think it's been an interesting journey to kind of see other women come into this space too, and for me to be able to help them and let them know they can be successful without some of those things that I think ultimately will help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And where did the book come into this? How
Yeah,
did the book Be Bold today? I'm assuming I see in the, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see in the backdrop she's got
yeah.
the
There's
poster with the book up, which I absolutely love. But
yeah.
how did the book kind of come into play? And was it something that you were thinking about even in your career before you jumped into entrepreneurship, or was it more once you became an entrepreneur that it came up?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people say, man, if I could write a book, right? And I think
Hmm.
everyone has a book in them, but not everybody is able to kind of get it out and kind of, be able to write it. For me, the bold framework really came about when I was making that move from the corporate world to an entrepreneur. So the believe, own, learn, design framework is what I needed actually for myself. So I created it to help me, understand what the steps were for my journey at that point. I had to dig into my beliefs. I had to understand what I was owning and not owning with regard to my journey and really dig into some of that. My big issue there was not owning anything that went right. I was always owning everything that went wrong.
Oh,
Probably a lot of women can relate to that. I
yes.
wasn't celebrating the wins, and if anything was accomplished, it was like, yeah, yeah, okay, let's move on. What's not working? And then the learning piece to the framework is really applying, truly applying your learnings to your journey and being very introspective and intentional. And design is really all about kind of how are you going to design your life? You have the pen, no one else should be writing it for you. And understanding what we're all about when we're doing that. So that framework really was what I created. So in 2020 is when it was created, and I wrote the book 4 years later with the experiences that I had had with it, working with other women in leadership, coaching women, and doing their retreats was very, very helpful for me to have insight into some of the same things that were similar, and also to see some of them go through the framework and see the impact that it had on their lives.
Can you tell us like the framework specifically? Can you share maybe like an example of a client who you've put through the
Hmm.
framework and how it's shifted how they
Sure,
show up in
yeah.
the world?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of women have used it. I mean, an example, just a few, from the perspective of just gaining confidence and clarity about what they wanted to do next. So I obviously left my corporate world, but it doesn't always have to be big and loud like that. Like our quieter moments, boldness really is on a continuum of quiet to loud. So, being able to understand how you're talking to yourself and being able to understand that your mindset and how you walk into a room really does set the stage for your actions and your ownership and those types of things that you do. So I've seen, an example of someone who had, if you asked them what they were when we started, her confidence level was probably a 2 or a 3. And her, she would say that her confidence level now is 10 off the charts. So in the sense of that, of like going through the process and understanding kind of her own beliefs, how they impacted her, some of the things that were happening, what she didn't own, but maybe had been taking in, and then applying those to really how she operated in the world around her. And incredible to see her journey and her, now speaking and on boards and just doing incredible things. Like she lights up a room when she comes in, and I'm just so, so, so proud of what she's done and the work that she's done. Because ultimately, I give them the guide. I create the space, hopefully, where we realize life is messy when we're evolving, and it's just not a perfect place to be, but it's a safe space to be in our community, in the Bold community. And just to see her and do the work and show up is just incredible. Other people have tuned relationships, done career pivots, started their own business. There seems to be a lot of interest in that as well, and then expanded their own ability to reach others. So it kind of runs the continuum of things they've done from, internal to really being able to see some of them externally.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing the stories that especially amazing women are out there creating because I do similar work
Hmm.
with my clients. And so often, we come in with, we think we're not good enough. Who am I to walk into the space? Am I, worthy to be here? And then we have to shift that inner critic, the negative self-talk that we have and those different conversations that we're having with, internally just with ourselves, let alone the ones we're having out in the world with other people. And when we
Hmm.
make that shift into that positive mindset and I am worthy, I deserve this, I've got this, it's so powerful and it's inspiring to see like the women like take ownership of their life and really put
Hmm.
themselves out there in those big courageous ways and really step into the people that they're actually meant to be versus who we think we should be or who we felt. I know for myself, like I felt like I put myself in a box just because of how I was raised and like I kind of played small. I didn't, I was kind of taught to sit quietly and not use my voice and not speak up for myself in moments when I should had.
Hmm.
And so that carried into my young adulthood and I had to retrain and reprogram myself and do the work to really realize like, no, I need to speak up for myself. I need to advocate. I need to, not hold back in moments when, when I was in retail management as a manager, like putting myself in a situation where I was like, here's my thoughts and here's actually what I think. Here's where I think we should go instead of just assuming everybody else was gonna, I was just gonna go along for the ride with what they wanted to do and what they wanted to say. And so that was empowering for me to learn that shift and then now
Hmm.
to be able to teach it to other women. Like there's something courageous that comes with that ability to be able to say like, okay, we don't have to do things the way that we were told to do. Let's actually make progress
Yeah, I
and make
love
shift
that.
and
Yeah, we
change.
need more. Yeah, we definitely need more of that. So please keep doing what you're doing because I think there is a lot of like following the path of, whoever's walking in front of us.
Yeah.
And like my visual is like, people just kind of, going along life and doing whatever someone else did or what the expectations were, or even doing something that isn't aligned with who they are now. Like it's okay to change. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to evolve and your dreams don't expire. So I think just people understanding that and you kind of giving them the little bit of the flashlight or the light of where they could go. Sure, here's the path you're on, but did you know there's another one over here that you actually can define, you can
Yeah.
actually create? And it may be like a lonely road when you first start off, but your people are going to come, you're going to, connect. And so just people realizing what there is and what's possible and opening their eyes to that, and then they do the work, right?
Yeah.
So I look at like I create the space and shine the light and give some tools and resources, and certainly I'm cheering them along with challenging them, and then it's just incredible to see it. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. We need more of that.
Yeah, thank you. You as well. And I think there's a piece to it too that always like when I think back to high school, everybody was trying to fit in and like
Hmm.
we are trying to like feel like we are a part of something. And then you start, your career and you start your businesses as entrepreneurs and like we're so stuck in like we're trying to be a part of what everybody else is doing that we don't even realize in the beginning that we have to like shift into like really standing out and putting ourselves in a different position so people can take notice because otherwise
Yeah,
we're just, part of the sheep flock
yeah.
out
It,
there
it's
and
a
then we all look vanilla. Everything's the same. There's not anything really allowing us to stand out and really grab the attention of other people. And especially as entrepreneurs, the one thing I learned for myself was I cannot blend in. I definitely need to like stand out and figure out how do I put myself in a position where people take notice and hear my voice and see what I see me and actually have my message heard and like move people with that message to take action from there.
Yeah. It's definitely a different feeling, for me from the corporate world where I really didn't do a lot of social. I really didn't, I didn't have a website. I didn't do any of that. Like I just
Yeah.
did my job and that was enough. Like, we have big jobs in all around. So like I didn't have time to do anything else.
Yeah.
And plus it wasn't anything that I felt called to do at that point. But when I came out of it, I had, obviously not worked on those pieces and had to develop them and really get them going. And it is a vulnerable type of moment. At least for me, it was because I had been so private, didn't really put anything out there before,
Yeah.
and it's a next level. But you can't actually help anyone if you don't share your story in some form or fashion. And you can choose how you do that. You can do it in talks that you don't have to do anything on social media. If you wanted, you could do it in, creating a club or a membership, a blog, a newsletter. You could, do the social thing as well. You really kind of, pick your adventure, but sharing your story and sharing what you're doing. And as entrepreneurs, that's a big part of what we do is we say why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that helps people also resonate with what they need or what you could possibly help them with, right? So putting it out there too, and like really aligning your words with your actions as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
it's nice to see that in action in some of the ways that we can communicate that to our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell my clients, I'm like, you have to share story in every single thing that you're doing. I don't care what you're doing, have even if it's one sentence of story, that's what's going to grab people's attention and really call them
Yeah.
in and make them pay attention because they're not going to hear your story and go, oh, it's exact same story as me. They're going to see their self though in your story. And
Yeah.
that's what's going to make them lean in. It's going to grab their attention and make them want to pay more attention to what you're talking about and want to learn more and kind of start to build that connection and relationship from there. So such a
Yeah.
good
They know.
point.
Yeah, they know they're not alone. And I think that's a big part of it too. And I think, for me, was the first time someone said to me, like, what you said or what you did really touched me and inspired me to, fill in the blank, whether it was take action or think about or reconsider or consider. Like, to me, that then was like this ding, ding, ding for me of like, this is a responsibility, actually. And I'm real good at taking on responsibility. I just have to make sure I don't take on too much,
Yeah.
as I've done in the past, which I think that was part of the burnout. But I think sharing your story and letting people know like the real deal and not just, the stuff that's awesome all the time. I
Yeah.
think it's good to see both ends because I think that helps people realize that, you're human and stuff goes right and stuff goes wrong, but you still keep going.
Yeah, so good because so often, especially when we think of social media, everybody shares all the warm, fuzzy, here's my vacation, here's the amazing things I'm doing. Look at me, like
Mhm.
everything looks like it's, rainbows, cupcakes, and rose-tinted
Butterflies. I always say
sunglasses.
it's not rainbows and butterflies all the time for
It's
sure.
not. And we all trip and fall. We stumble over
Yeah.
our words, we make mistakes. And I know for myself, like failing doesn't mean I failed. It means I get a chance to do it again and try harder and do things from a different way. And
Yeah.
and we beat ourselves up as a society so much like, oh, we failed, we didn't make it, we didn't succeed, we weren't the best. But how do we learn from those experiences? How do we take the knowledge that we learned during that process and revamp ourselves and really step into a bigger, bolder, courageous version of ourselves at that point?
Yeah. Some people say like I know you've heard this, but the first attempt in learning, that's what fail is the
Yeah.
acronym for. So definitely if you do have something that doesn't work, like what can you learn from it and pulling out those bits and pieces and whether it's, oh, I'm not going to go that route. I'm not going to do this again without thinking through it more, being more strategic, or I thought that person could be my partner. I'm not going to let that taint me anymore. But I think, I will look for different partners or whatever it may be, and kind of the decision or the action you're taking. And also, don't forget when things go right to see kind of what you can replicate from that. Like, what did I learn from that? It actually hit. I mean, an example recently for me, just from the business, is, looking at open rate and click rate on your emails. And, for us, I think we've been working on different things, and that's something that we're seeing a much higher rate for that with some of the tweaks we've done with the content or making it more engaging and add a little humor to it and not being so buttoned up. I think, that's really helped. And there's a volume for that. So, but getting it just right is not always something you can do easily. So that's an example of like a win. We might not have sold as many of X, but just the fact that we had so many clicks and so many opens, that meant, we were on to something. So that's like an example of like, what can we dig into what went right too?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're nurturing the community at that point. Like people are listening, they're paying attention, they're reading, they're engaging.
Hmm.
And we don't know when people are like when they're gonna say yes to us. Like a
Hmm.
lot of times, some people come into our communities and they see our content immediately and it's exactly what they were searching for and they found us at the right time and they're ready to go. And I've had clients that have been in my community for like 6 years and they come when they're ready, they poke their head up and they're like, "Hey, like I'm ready, let's do this." And
Yeah.
sometimes I've been like, "Who the heck are you?" And they're like, "Oh, I've been on your newsletter list for 6 years." And I'm like,
Exactly. Or like, I
They had
got your
never,
free X. Yeah. And
yeah,
yeah.
they're like, they never had posted on a social post or emailed me back or, connected. I had never met them. And I think those
Hmm.
are like some of my favorite times because it just makes me realize, like, even when it feels like we're doing stuff that nobody's paying attention, people are still listening, people are watching, and
Yeah.
that's
You never know. Yeah.
consistency.
Yeah, you never know that you hear these stories of like, as you start off on social of like, my mom was liking my stuff or my, like
Yeah.
your friends, your close friends. And there was a story most recently where, one of the people that was following this guy, what worked for Oprah and ended up actually sharing his stuff with her and went on to like do some incredible stuff. And like he literally had 14 followers. So those moments do happen. And I think the key thing is don't stop. Like just keep going. And I have to say this to myself too. So it is something that takes time. It's certainly something that takes effort and thought. And so don't put it on auto. I think it's very hard to actually divvy it out to someone else when you're kind of the key thought leader for your organization. And so you certainly can have people help you, but definitely putting your fingerprints and your tone and your voice is so, so important on those types of things that you do communicate to your community.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. When you think about when you started your business 5 years ago, you and your daughter, what would you say has been like one of the things that has helped you find success so quickly, like in your business that like lights you up and gets you excited and it's like bringing business in too? Like what's some of the secret things that
Yeah.
you feel like have led to some of your success?
Yeah, I think you keep tuning, right? So I think early on, starting off, a big focus on consulting and making sure that we had a pipeline for revenue and, the basics of business. Like, don't forget the basics. I think a lot of the times, and it's could be men and women, I think, but I think it is harder for women, and there's a lot of women entrepreneurs, but women entrepreneurs achieving seven figures, women entrepreneurs getting to some of those levels, it's a very, very small percentage, right? We're talking less than 1%
Yeah.
in some of the areas. So I think, don't forget the basics. And I think, I've made some mistakes along the way of like, okay, I don't need to do this as much. Now I can, have more fun over here and in a way. And I think that was just part of probably also being burnout. But don't lose sight of those types of things. And then as you're growing and adding things in, do it in a strategic way. Like for example, like bold retreats, bold tables, and my podcast all came 2 years after I started. And in year one, I was doing the consulting, with my team, and we added members and all those types of things, the mechanics and tactical things you do in a business. I started to grow my thought leadership in year one and year two. And then I started doing those things. They had never been on my list before. They really kind of evolved organically through what I was doing. Some of the mistakes I've seen is people, they want to skip a lot of steps. They want to have like, literal overnight success, which I think they
Mhm.
see that. And you probably have experienced this too with maybe some of your clients. They see that online and they think, I don't have to develop anything. I can just go straight. I want to be a speaker. I want to speak on stages. And it's like, what's your platform? What are, who's following you? Like in the sense of kind of what have you learned from that? Because there's learnings in your community too that make, your talks or the things that you can share even more powerful. So I think just remember, the basics of business, and then I think be thoughtful and pragmatic how you add in to your offerings and try not to do everything all at once.
Yeah, such great advice.
Yeah.
So what is next for you? Like what's coming up with your business? What's exciting you for what's around the corner?
Yeah, so I think, we're in year five. Every year is like a different emoji. 2024 was a bit rough for a lot of entrepreneurs and I think a lot of businesses. And for me, it was like a combination of just some of the business side of it, but also just like evolution of like doing less. And what I mean by that is really simplifying some of the offerings, combining the things I'm seeing working and kind of getting rid of some of the stuff that isn't. I think that's really important. So I have a year of simplification and clarity around my offerings. So instead of going like, instead of having 10, and I'm just making up that number, getting it to a solid 4. And these are the same, things, but maybe they're packaged or put together in a different way for people. That's definitely happening this year. I have, my first book, Be Bold, today. I'm super excited about everything around that book. And then I have a second book coming out this year in the fall. So, and it's more of a business book focused on really the consulting model that I created. So lots going on there, and been doing a lot of traveling and getting out there and sharing the bold message. And so continuing to do that and to share just hopefully possibility and the power of that with as many people that I can.
Yeah. Love it. Absolutely. We have to be bold. We have to put ourselves out there and we have to get out there and get our message into the
Yeah.
world. So I love that you're doing just that.
Yeah, definitely. Share it far and wide.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to jump into some rapid fire questions so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Okay.
You mentioned you love to celebrate wins. When you have a win, what's one way that you like to celebrate those successes?
As silly as this sound, like I just like to get outside and, whether it's go for a big walk or, take a loop around on the skis. We talked about cross country skiing here in New England. Getting outside and just kind of being together without anything else, like, being with my family, my husband and my daughter and the dogs, and just getting outside. I love to do that.
That's awesome. This might be similar, but like if you're having a rough day and you need to reset, reflect, and recharge, what's like the
Yeah.
first thing you like to do?
Get away from the dang desk, I'll tell you that. So like that, as an entrepreneur, when our offices right now are still here and in our home. And so in the sense of that, like being able to like just get away, get some separation. And it might be doing those things that I just talked about. I also love just a good bookstore visit, like just going to a bookstore and kind of getting lost, like just meandering, not having a true purpose of why you're there. I always end up with a book or two, but I think that's also a nice mindset reset for me of just kind of like, okay, it's going to be fine, or I'll figure it out, or whatever it may be. That's a nice reset for me.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into what book is on your nightstand, or are you binge watching anything specific right now when you're unwinding at night?
Yeah, so I'm reading Dr. Doty's book around manifesting. So that's the book that's on my nightstand. So really, there's a lot of talk about manifesting, and I think many people might not realize that you need to do things as well as, go through the process of manifesting. There's an action
Uh,
part to it. Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that's a really cool book, and it really talks about the neuroscience. I recently just watched an incredible documentary about a climber who climbed, it's called 14 Peaks, and the actual project that he called his project was the Possible Project. So they told him he couldn't climb 14 peaks in a certain amount of time, over 8,000 um, meters, I think it is. I'm not a climber, but
yeah,
it's incredible. His tenacity, his resilience, his lack of any type of fear ever was just so impressive. And I'm still talking about it. So check that out. It's on Netflix. And to me, I always like look at those things and I go, I think about leadership. I think about legacy. I think about kind of what does, certainly boldness. And so just thinking about what he did, and his name is Nims is his first name. So in the sense of that, like just seeing that, I'm just in awe of like so many things that he did
that
and
sounds cool.
pushed through. Yeah, incredible. So yeah, check it
Definitely,
out.
definitely something I've never even thought about doing, but after
Yeah,
watching, I'd be like, I
I
can do
will,
that. Like, let's
I
go.
yeah, I will pass on that, every day. I will not like be climbing, Mount Everest or anything
I'm
soon.
pretty sure it would be too cold for me up there.
It might be, yeah, that
I
might be
would
a little
freeze to
chilly.
death.
Yeah, it's incredible. But yeah, check it out. You'll be in awe kind of like just what they did, and the connection between him and his team was just also very inspiring.
Mhm. It's pretty amazing when someone sets their mind to something and they want to do it and they actually go out there and do it and they bring the people around them, like you said, like the team that he brought around him to help him reach those goals and being told they couldn't do it. And
Yeah.
he's probably a little bit like me. If you tell me I can't do it, I'm like, watch me, like, let's go.
Big time, yeah, big time, yeah. And the respect that they had for one another and the level of caring and empathy, like it was a master class in leadership.
Yeah,
So we ended up watching the whole thing all at one time. So that was definitely something that was a surprise and
awesome.
definitely a learning for me. I think I can take away too for some of the things
Yeah.
I saw.
Yeah, there's so many things I feel like when like especially documentaries like
Hmm.
it's almost like it's inspiring and
Yeah.
motivational content for us as entrepreneurs or just human beings who are wanting to do cool things in our career in our lives. Like there's so much motivation to hear these stories, and it goes back to what we were talking about even earlier, like the stories that we hear and that we share, like they impact us. Like you
Hmm.
hearing that story impacts you and how you show up and support your clients and how you show up in the world. And so there's so much that comes from just listening to somebody else's story.
Yeah, there's definitely a ripple effect for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited we got to hear your story today. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast and just, sharing what you're up to and how you're making a huge impact in the world. I know people are going to want to connect with you. They want to be bold today, not tomorrow,
Mhm.
today. So how do they connect with you and where should they go find you?
Yeah, so definitely check out the website. I think that's leighburgess.com, the best place to go. You'll see all the things that we do, the book tab, and as well as some of the things that are coming up for us in the future in our community. So would love to have people check that out and follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Very cool. And I know you have a free gift, a download for people. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what they'll get?
Yeah, so they definitely can check out the Bold framework as it is and kind of see the pieces and parts that they would want to apply. And then if they want to pick up the book, obviously hand in glove there to be able to take the actual framework and work through it through the book. And it's really nice because the book has a lot of exercises and resources. It is one that will, take you through the journey almost like a coach in your hands as you do that. But the framework gives you a good start, and that's easily downloadable for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Leigh, so much for coming on the podcast. I so appreciate you being here and just, spreading your message with the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And that's a wrap, everybody, for another episode of the Attract and Standout podcast. If you're new here, please hit subscribe, leave a review, let us know what you think of the episode, what's coming up for you, and come back. Every couple of weeks, we have a new episode that drops, and I would love for you to be a part of this community and just keep helping put your message out into the world. And as always, know I believe in you. You're allowed to stand out. You're allowed to shine. You're allowed to be you. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.